You mentioned being obese, getting type 1 diabetes. Do you feel like there's a connection there?
That's a funny question because I think the last time we spoke, I would have said no. The answer to that is probably now yes. So, as a researcher, you come across new data and information that makes you change the way you think, or at least hopefully changes the way you think when you're presented with new information. And I used to think type 1 diabetes getting type 1 diabetes had nothing to do with lifestyle. Okay, it had nothing to do with the choices I made and the decisions I made, and as a result, it's not my fault. However, when you actually look at various reasons why someone gets type 1 diabetes, genetics doesn't explain it for the vast majority of people. It may increase your risk for some people subtly. Like I have type 1 diabetes. My son risk, I think, is 1 in 7 or 1 in 14. Okay. Whereas, Jesse, if you don't have type 1 diabetes, well, I assume you don't. If you had a son, his risk would be 1 in 300. Okay. Whereas mine is infinitely higher, right? But it's still very low. It's still less than a 10% chance. But when you start looking at things that induce risk, and they look at this through these large epidemiological data sets where they look at people who have type 1 diabetes and various factors that they had that would potentially link risk to developing disease. Okay, so let's say you had 100 people, they all had type 1 diabetes, and some people were overweight and some people weren't. Some people got breastfed, some people didn't. Some people had, exercise, some didn't. And you can link what is the percentage of individuals or association between their onset of disease and one of those lifestyle choices or habits or other factors. And so they looked at this for a number of different things. And one of the strongest risks, reliably, not just for type 1 diabetes, but for virtually every autoimmune disorder, is obesity. Obesity is one of the most powerful risk factors for developing type 1 diabetes. And I would have normally said in the past, honestly, up to about 2 years ago, that obesity had nothing to do with my disease. In fact, I had lost a bunch of weight a year prior. But I did a whole hell of a lot in a 5-year period with obesity, though. And as a result, I probably did put myself at dramatically higher risk for type 1 diabetes. And in fact, I don't think I did. I know I did. Now, I don't know if it was the cause, but I don't know. No one knows what the cause is of the type 1 diabetes. For the most part, maybe you got a virus right before. Maybe that was or wasn't the cause. Who knows? But we know that obesity dramatically increases the risk, just like we know certain viral infections increase the risk, and et cetera, et cetera. So I actually would say that the answer to that is almost certainly it certainly added gasoline to the fire, and maybe it was the cause.
And I don't ask that to point fingers towards type 1 diabetes in your case or anybody else with a chronic disease, but just to understand the physiology and give people a heads up who are on that path that there's these other things that could be smoldering behind the scenes and certain consequences of living that lifestyle.
Absolutely. And by the way, a lot of people do get offended when you talk about lifestyle factors causing type 1 diabetes, probably largely because they've been told that it wasn't their fault, right? But the reality is that, yeah, there are a lot of things and choices that we're starting to realize that people are making that are putting them at risk. And yeah, type 1 diabetes isn't fair. Not everyone who's obese is going to get type 1 diabetes, but it's dramatically increasing your risk. So let's just call a spade a spade. People need to have the accurate and right information. Obesity increases your risk. Obesity is something you can correct with lifestyle, period. So if you have obesity, it is potentially putting you at risk, okay, for getting one of these conditions. But it's also putting you at risk for diabetes. It's putting you at risk for cardiovascular disease. It's putting you at risk for neurological changes, or at least early onset adverse changes. There's so many things that it puts you at risk for. And arguably, that's the most common universal theme among so many diseases, which is why the emergence of these new drugs like GLP-1 receptor agonists, which reduce hunger in the diet so people can lose weight, are reducing virtually every major chronic condition in the United States when people take them, because obesity is such a central driver of many of these adverse effects.
Now that we're into the GLP-1 agonists, expand upon your thoughts in that realm.
I think they're incredibly powerful tools, right? So when we think about people we've known that diet can help obesity for 200 years. Well, technically a little over 150 years, 170 years actually. But still, people struggle with it, right? And so these are incredibly powerful tools that can help curb one of the most difficult parts of losing weight, which is the hunger, right? So if you're able to silence some of that hunger, it can help people make the right decisions they know they should make, but their brain and biology is telling them not to, right? And so that's what those tools are largely doing. Yes, there's some other peripheral effects, but the large, overwhelming power of these drugs is to reduce hunger in the brain. And when they help reduce hunger, they allow people to make better choices with their food. Or, let me say this differently. You would hope it would allow them to make better choices with their food. But what it's doing is just reducing the desire to eat. But what people should be aware of is that they need to be developing sustainable lifestyle strategies that allow them to shift towards better eating habits, prioritizing the right type of food, which isn't always easy on these drugs, because a lot of times on these drugs, people want to have sugary and sweeter based foods. They just want a lot less of them. But the reality is that when you're in these massive caloric deficits that these drugs induce, you need essential nutrients. So that means protein and fat. And also diet mostly composed of protein and fat will also help preserve things like muscle mass, which is something that some people are concerned about with these drugs and how rapid the weight loss is. Although the data is kind of questionable if you're going to have that much muscle loss compared to just a diet-induced muscle loss. But either way, the same theme is there. These are assistants and tools along the way, but you have to build sustainable lifestyle strategies. So I hope people would view these as tools in the toolbox to assist them in making the choices that are fundamental to overall health. Number one, choosing the right whole foods dietary strategy that helps them feel good, maintain normal body weight, and remove themselves, if possible, of things that are conditions that they've developed, okay? And we've talked about the ketogenic diet. That's just one of the many choices that someone can make, maybe one of the most evidence-based ways or diets that someone can make. But that's something that people need to develop along their journey. They also should be exercising, okay? GLP-1s don't necessarily make someone motivated to exercise, but they may help them lose weight so that every step they're taking around the block to walk that 1 mile is not as heavy, right? Or maybe it helps them lose weight so they don't feel self-conscious in walking into the gym for the first time. Whatever it may be, they should be exercising as well. And realize that you're not alone. So anytime that you feel subconscious of yourself and you're uncertain, I was that person too. I was terrified to walk into the gym for the first time. No, but that's because I was terrified of what everyone was going to think of me. No one cared what I looked like. The only person who cared was myself. No one else cared. Okay. In fact, I can tell you as someone who's been through this journey, when I see someone who is much, much heavier walking into the gym for the first time and getting after it, it's the most motivational thing. Okay, the most motivational thing. In fact, I was competing in a jiu-jitsu tournament recently, and there was a guy who was an ex-military vet who had lost both of his lower limbs due to an event in the military. Guy was out there on the mat in a jiu-jitsu tournament. Like someone was about to go fight him and choke him out, and he showed up on the mat and fought multiple mats. And he was good. Like this guy was legit. Okay. And so it just goes to show, like, at the end of the day, you just got to focus on your own progress. People are actually going to be cheering you on more than you realize. Don't worry too much and be subconscious about those things. It's about getting after it and realize that the biggest critic is yourself. No one else cares. Only you really care. Okay. But the only thing that can really help you is actually taking steps on that journey. So I kind of got a little bit of a soapbox there, but ultimately, I hope someone can gain some motivation from that, because I'm not just someone sitting here as a researcher who studied these phenomenon. I've actually lived this. I know how much it sucks to be obese. I know how much it affects your self-esteem, especially in childhood. I know how much how much difficulty it is with all the information that people throw your way. Say, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. Take all that information, take all the things that are consistent about what people are saying, and then find something that will work for you. Okay, you may hear something I'm saying and say, oh, look, I'm going to do what he said. Well, yeah, if you did it, like it's probably going to work for you, but maybe it's not the approach for you. But you've heard something I've said, you've heard something from one of your other guests that Jesse has on here, or one of the other health experts. Look at the common themes and then look around you for people who've actually been successful. Okay, don't look at the guy, take it for what it's worth. If you were to look at me when I was obese as a kid and I saw another kid and I would start giving them advice on how to lose weight, he probably wouldn't listen to me. Should he listen to me? Probably not. Okay, so you probably should look for people who actually have gone through that journey, who have actually gotten through to the other side and been successful and maintained it. Those are people who have really important information to share with you. Now, is that information going to be applicable to you universally? Oh, probably not. But it helps if you can find people who've done it successfully, learn from what they have to say, learn from the experts on this podcast, find the themes of that are universal, fundamental, and then apply the things that you can. They don't have to do everything. And we already talked about that. You can't do everything all at once. You just take the first step. That's the most important thing.
No, I think that was great and could be the most important part of this conversation, because to me, there's a couple different pillars that need to be addressed, and the information is just one piece. Having the motivation is the other big piece. And then I'll add to that and say, take action now. Because if you're motivated hearing Andrew right now, that may fade over the next couple of days. So if you're hearing his story, hearing this information, it's resonating, take action right away. Take that one step, build the momentum while you're motivated here, because that may fade and you might lose that opportunity.
Actually, I should ask people to pause the episode right now, go out, put their shoes on, and go walk outside and listen to this. Because at the end of the day, motivation is just going to fade. I can promise you that. But you got to show up. You got to know what's going to be work. You got to build consistent routines and just do it. The amount of times that even to today, okay, like if I go eat a ton of food, I'm going to go get massive. I'm going to blow up like a balloon. Trust me, I've done it. So I know what I'm talking about here. I'm still live this journey. I'm someone who has abs right now. I exercise an hour and a half, 2 hours a day. And people would think, I have an example here, Jesse, for you. I went and spoke at a world-renowned obesity center about our research on the ketogenic diet and diabetes. And the head researcher at that institute is a huge name. And said, because you haven't struggled with obesity before, you probably haven't experienced X, Y, Z. I'm like, I was clinically obese in adolescence for 5 years, and just the shock on their face. I'm like, I have to work at this all the time. I just developed tools that allow me to have power over the situation. Okay. It didn't go away from me. I'm just like everyone else. Okay? But I show up every single day. I'm consistent. I don't always want to be. I can promise you that. Someone puts a pizza in front of my face. Do I want to eat it? Yes. Yes, I do. But I also know the consequences of it. I know over the next few days, that 30 minutes of pleasure is going to lead to 6, 12 plus hours of hell. I know that. So it's usually about thinking forward. Like if I continue to make these same choices in my life, what's going to happen in 1 year? What's going to happen in 5 years? What's going to happen in 10 years? And do I want that? Because I can promise you, it's not going to magically change tomorrow. Not unless you make a choice to change. I guarantee you, because if that was going to happen, it would have already happened for you. And it hasn't. So the only way it's going to change is if you make a decision today to just do it. Don't overthink it. Don't even wait for it to be perfect. I promise you that day never comes. There's no day where it's just perfect. And it's just going to be perfect and you just fall into doing everything you're supposed to do. No, that doesn't happen. You have to know that you got to show up and you have to be consistent and you have to have the right lifestyle techniques. And also, by the way, you will stumble and hit your face a few times along the way. You just got to get back up and keep walking. Most people don't. So if you can do it, you'll get further. That's all you got to do. Get up, keep walking, keep walking and go. Don't wait. Just do it.
Since you made it to the end of this clip, I know you're going to love the full episode. Click here to watch. I'll see you over there.
I was a fat kid growing up. I had obesity as a kid. I failed for over half a decade on all these various diet strategies, and I eventually found success with reliably and sustainably changing my diet.